Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. To get daily new and amazing stories for you, subscribe our channel and press bell icon. All right, let's begin. The winter night pressed down on the city like a weight. Wind cut through empty streets, carrying with it the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog. Snow from the afternoon storm had hardened into patches of ice that crunched under hurried footsteps. The bus stop on Maple Avenue stood alone under a flickering yellow streetlight, its glass panels smeared with grime, posters peeling from years of neglect. Most nights, no one lingered there for long. Tonight, someone did. A boy sat curled up on the bench, his knees drawn tight to his chest, his chin resting against the thin fabric of his jacket. His sneakers were ripped open at the front, the toes inside raw, red, and exposed to the freezing air. Each shallow breath fogged into the night, disappearing as quickly as it came. His lips moved, barely forming the words. "Please, I'm so cold." No one stopped. A woman in a long coat glanced at him for half a second, then turned her face away, pretending not to hear. A man carrying groceries pulled his hat lower and walked faster. They all saw him, but they chose not to. Across the street, Adrian Holt adjusted the strap of his worn leather bag, the one he carried from his second job. His eyes were bleary, his shoulders stiff from another 12-hour shift. All he wanted was the warmth of his home, the comfort of his bed. But then he heard it, a voice, thin and breaking, carried by the wind. He froze. The words weren't loud, but something about the tone sliced through the noise of the night. Adrian turned his head toward the bus stop. At first, he saw only the shape of a boy, small, fragile, trembling under the pale light. Then the details sharpened. The torn shoes, the shaking shoulders, the whispered plea. "Please, I'm so cold." Adrian's chest tightened. His first instinct was simple human pity. Who would leave a child out here, alone, at this hour? But as he stepped closer, his heart stumbled in his chest. The boy lifted his head. Their eyes met. Adrian's breath caught. It was Miles, his son, his 12-year-old boy, who should have been asleep at home, tucked safely beneath the blankets Clara had layered on him earlier that evening. "Miles!" Adrian's voice cracked, barely a whisper. The boy's eyes widened. For a second, they held nothing but shock, as though he had been caught doing something forbidden. Then the fear melted into something worse, shame. Tears welled, spilling over, glistening in the half-working light of the bus stop. "Dad," his voice was hoarse, trembling. "Don't tell Mom." Adrian's body went numb. The wind roared in his ears, though he wasn't sure if it was the storm outside or the storm rising inside him. He rushed forward, stripping off his heavy coat and wrapping it around Miles's shaking frame. The boy clutched at it desperately, his small hands stiff from the cold, but his eyes never left Adrian's face. Adrian crouched in front of him, voice low, desperate. "What are you doing out here? Why aren't you home?" Miles's lips pressed together. He shook his head, tears streaking down his cheeks. "Please don't tell her." The street seemed to fall silent in that moment. Even the cars that hissed by in the distance felt far away. All Adrian could see was his son, frozen and fragile, whispering secrets in the night. 100 questions crashed into his mind. Had Miles run away? Was someone hurting him? Why the secrecy from Clara? But no answers came. Only the echo of that single plea. "Don't tell Mom." Adrian tightened his hold on the boy, his own breath unsteady. Whatever this was, it was bigger than he had imagined. And he knew one thing for certain. Tonight was only the beginning. Adrian's arms trembled as he lifted Miles from the icy bench. The boy's body felt too light, his clothes stiff with cold. Adrian wrapped his coat tighter around him and glanced at the strangers passing by, each one deliberately ignoring them, as though pretending not to notice or erase their responsibility. He wanted to shout at them, "This is my son. My boy is freezing in front of you." But his throat locked. Right now, Miles was all that mattered. They crossed the empty street quickly, Adrian shielding Miles against his chest from the wind. His footsteps struck sharp against the pavement, carrying the weight of both urgency and fear. The entire walk home, Miles stayed silent, his small hand clutching the edge of his father's coat like a secret he didn't want to let slip. "Don't tell, Mom," Miles whispered again, barely audible over the gusts. Adrian's jaw clenched. "Miles, I don't understand. Why would I keep this from her? She loves you more than anything." But the boy just shook his head, eyes down, refusing to answer. By the time they reached the worn brick house on Oak Ridge Lane, Adrian's heart was hammering so hard he feared Clara would hear it even through her dreams upstairs. The porch light flickered faintly, welcoming yet fragile, much like their family these days. Inside, the warmth of the heater enveloped them. Adrian shut the door softly, mindful of the creak that sometimes woke Clara. He set Miles down gently, helping him out of the damp sneakers and rubbing his frozen hands until the color returned. Miles wouldn't look at him. His eyes were fixed on the floorboards, his expression carrying both fear and guilt. Adrian knelt in front of him. "You need to tell me the truth, son. Why were you out there?" Miles's lips parted, but the words never came. Instead, he shivered, shrinking deeper into the oversized coat. "Do you know what could have happened?" Adrian pressed, voice trembling between anger and terror. "You could have frozen. Someone could have." He stopped himself, the thought too painful. He took a deep breath, softening. "You don't belong on a bus stop bench. You belong here. Safe." The silence stretched. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking of the wall clock. Miles's shoulders rose and fell in shallow breaths, but still he didn't speak. Adrian forced calm into his voice. "Fine. Not tonight. You're exhausted. But tomorrow, Miles, I need answers. Do you understand?" The boy finally lifted his eyes. They were glassy, full of unspoken words, but also full of fear. Not fear of punishment, but fear of what might happen if the truth came out. "Understand," he whispered, then added again, like a mantra, "Don't tell, Mom." Adrian's chest tightened. He wanted a promise, if only to ease his son's trembling. But he couldn't. He looked toward the staircase, where Clara slept unaware, fragile from her long recovery. She deserved the truth too. But how could he shatter her peace with this image? Their son, alone in the freezing dark, begging strangers for warmth? Adrian brushed a strand of damp hair from Miles's forehead and kissed the top of his head. "Go upstairs. Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." Miles obeyed silently, climbing the stairs with slow, heavy steps. Adrian watched until his son disappeared into his bedroom. Left alone in the kitchen, Adrian sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. His mind spun in circles, questions piling with no answers. Why was Miles hiding this? What secret could be so heavy that he'd rather freeze in the night than let his mother know? The clock struck midnight. Clara shifted upstairs, the faint creak of the mattress echoing through the quiet. Adrian's stomach twisted. Tomorrow, he would demand the truth. But tonight, he sat in silence, haunted by the sound of his son's whisper at the bus stop. "Dad, don't tell Mom." The morning sun crept through the thin curtains, casting pale stripes across the worn dining table. Adrian sat with a mug of coffee cooling in his hands, staring into it as though the dark surface held answers. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Miles curled up at that bus stop, whispering, "I'm so cold." The image gnawed at him like a wound that refused to close. Upstairs, he heard footsteps. Clara's soft voice hummed faintly, a morning habit she'd kept even through months of recovery. A moment later, Miles appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, hair messy, eyes downcast. He slid into the chair opposite his father without a word. Adrian studied him. The boy's face was pale, but it wasn't just from the cold night. It was the look of someone carrying something too heavy. "Morning," Adrian said gently, trying to sound normal. "Morning," Miles mumbled, barely audible. He reached for a piece of toast, but only picked at it, pushing crumbs around the plate. Clara entered then, her robe tied loosely around her waist. Her face brightened at the sight of them. "Both of my boys at the table before I even come down? That's a miracle." She smiled and kissed Miles on the head. "How'd you sleep, sweetheart?" Miles stiffened. "Fine," he said quickly, too quickly. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Adrian's chest tightened. Clara didn't notice, or maybe she didn't want to. She poured herself coffee and sat beside Adrian, resting a hand on his arm. "You look exhausted," she whispered. "Long shift," he lied, forcing a weak smile. He couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not until he understood. As Clara chatted lightly about errands and the neighbor's barking dog, Adrian's eyes never left Miles. Every small movement screamed unease. The way his son avoided eye contact, how his hand trembled slightly as he lifted the toast, the way he flinched when Clara asked, "You have everything ready for school?" I think so," Miles stammered. He excused himself quickly, heading upstairs to gather his bag. Adrian leaned toward Clara. "He's been off lately. Quieter. You notice?" Clara frowned, stirring her coffee. "He's 12, Adrian. Kids his age go through phases. He'll grow out of it." Adrian wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe his son was just moody, that last night had been some kind of misunderstanding. But the memory of those torn shoes and whispered pleas burned in his mind. When Miles came back down, Adrian stood and touched his shoulder. "I'll drive you today." Miles hesitated. "I can walk." "It's fine." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "No, I'll drive." The ride to school was silent, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. Adrian gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles pale. Miles sat with his backpack clutched on his lap, staring out the window, avoiding his father's gaze. At a red light, Adrian finally spoke. "Miles, listen to me. Whatever's going on, I need to know. You're my son. I can't protect you if you shut me out." For a moment, Miles's eyes flicked toward him. His lips parted, as though he might finally say something. But the light turned green, and he looked away again. "Dad," he said softly, "please, just don't tell Mom." Adrian's grip tightened on the wheel. That phrase again, sharp, insistent, like a key to a locked door he hadn't yet found. When they reached the school gates, Miles slipped out quickly, blending into the stream of students. Adrian watched him go, a gnawing unease twisting inside him. Something was pulling his son into the shadows, and Adrian feared it wasn't just about money or secrets. It was something deeper. He drove away slowly, his thoughts heavy. He needed to uncover the truth before it consumed his boy completely. The day stretched long and restless. Adrian sat at his office desk, paperwork stacked around him, but his mind wasn't on numbers or reports. Every time he tried to focus, his thoughts slid back to Miles. The way his son's voice had trembled, the way he'd begged him not to tell Clara. The image of the boy's torn shoes haunted him like a photograph burned into his mind. By the time Adrian returned home that evening, his nerves were frayed. The house smelled faintly of soup, Clara's attempt at cooking despite her lingering weakness. She greeted him warmly, but Adrian's eyes immediately scanned the room for Miles. "Upstairs," Clara said, noticing. He went straight to his room after school. He said he was tired. Adrian nodded, though unease prickled his skin. He climbed the staircase, each creak of the wooden steps louder than the last. At the door to Miles's room, he paused. The boy's voice drifted out, low and urgent. Adrian leaned closer. "I'll come tomorrow. I promise. Just, please don't tell anyone." Adrian's chest tightened. He pushed the door open slowly. Miles jerked upright, stuffing something into his backpack. His eyes widened at the sight of his father. "Who were you talking to?" Adrian's voice was steady, but the tension in it was sharp. "No one," Miles said quickly, too quickly. His cheeks flushed as he zipped his bag shut. Adrian stepped inside. "Don't lie to me, Miles. I heard you. Who are you talking to?" Miles's shoulders hunched, his fingers tightening around the backpack straps. "It was just a friend." "What friend?" Adrian pressed. "What kind of friend asks you to keep secrets from your parents?" Miles's lip trembled. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. The silence screamed louder than any answer. Adrian took a slow breath, forcing himself not to raise his voice. "Son, I'm not angry, but you can't shut me out. If someone is making you do something, it's not like that." Miles burst out suddenly, eyes blazing with a desperation that startled Adrian. "No one's making me do anything. I'm doing it because I want to." Adrian blinked, the words hitting him harder than expected. "Doing what?" Miles froze. His jaw clenched, and he looked away. "I can't tell you," he whispered. The room seemed to shrink around them. Adrian's pulse thundered in his ears. Miles, do you realize what you're saying? You're freezing at bus stops, whispering to strangers, hiding things in your bag. Miles hugged the backpack tighter, as if it contained his very soul. His small body shook, his eyes wet but defiant. You wouldn't understand. Adrian moved closer, his voice breaking. Then help me understand, son. Please. I can't stand watching you destroy yourself in silence. For a long moment, Miles just stared at the floor. Then, slowly, he loosened his grip and unzipped the bag. Adrian leaned forward, breath caught. Inside was a crumpled wad of small bills and coins, sticky from soda spills, dirty from hands that had passed them. It wasn't much, maybe $15 at most. But for a 12-year-old, it was a fortune. Adrian's throat went dry. Where did you get this? Miles hesitated. His voice was barely a whisper. I earned it. The air between them crackled. Adrian's mind raced. Earned how? Doing what? The boy's tone was proud, yet ashamed, as though he was clinging to the idea that this secret mission gave him purpose. Adrian reached out, his hand brushing against the coins. Miles, listen to me. Whatever this is, it's not safe. You shouldn't be out there doing. Stop, Miles cried, yanking the bag back. His face crumpled, his voice breaking. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm just trying to help. Adrian froze. The words hit him like a knife. Help? His son, 12 years old, sitting in the cold at bus stops, clutching dirty coins, all in the name of helping. Before he could ask more, Clara's voice floated up from downstairs. Dinner's ready. Miles wiped his eyes quickly, shoving the bag under his bed. He looked at Adrian with pleading eyes. Please, Dad, don't tell Mom. Not yet. Adrian's heart ached. The urge to protect his wife from this truth battled against the need to protect his son from whatever he was hiding. He nodded stiffly, though his gut twisted with guilt. As they walked downstairs together, the secret hung between them, heavy and poisonous. Adrian now knew part of the truth. His son was earning money in secret. But the how, the why, the danger of it all remained hidden in the shadows. Dinner that night unfolded under a veil of silence. The steam from Clara's soup curled into the air, but neither Adrian nor Miles seemed to notice. Clara tried to carry the conversation, speaking softly about a new neighbor moving in down the street, about the weather turning harsher this winter. But her words floated unanswered, fading into the tense quiet. Adrian's gaze flicked to Miles every few seconds. The boy ate slowly, each spoonful mechanical, his shoulders hunched as though bracing for questions. He avoided his mother's eyes, and that alone stirred Clara's unease. Miles, she said finally, her tone light but probing. How was school today? He froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Fine. Just fine, she pressed. He nodded quickly. Yeah, just normal. Adrian saw it instantly. The stiffness in his son's voice, the way his hand trembled slightly as he set the spoon down. Clara's brow furrowed. She glanced at Adrian, silently asking if he knew something she didn't. Adrian forced a small smile, trying to shield her from the truth, at least for now. After dinner, Clara headed to the living room to rest, leaving father and son at the table. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the kitchen clock. Finally, Adrian leaned forward. Son, we can't keep doing this. You hiding, me pretending not to see it. I know about the money. You need to tell me how you got it. Miles's eyes darted toward the doorway, checking if Clara could hear. His voice dropped to a whisper. I told you. I earned it. Ow! Adrian's voice cracked, sharper than he intended. What exactly are you doing out there? Because coins stuffed in a bag don't just appear. Miles's jaw tightened. He looked at the floor, his face pale. It's nothing bad. I swear. That's not good enough, Adrian pressed. You're 12. You don't belong on the streets at night. Tell me the truth. Miles's lips quivered, torn between fear and defiance. If I tell you, you'll stop me. And I can't stop. Not yet. Adrian's stomach dropped. The words hit him like a warning, dark and final. Not yet. His son wasn't just keeping secrets. He was committed to them. Why, Miles? Adrian whispered. Why would you risk everything? Freezing, sneaking out, what's worth all that? The boy's eyes glistened. For the first time, his voice cracked with raw emotion. Because you and Mom need me to. Adrian's chest ached. He reached across the table, but Miles pulled back, clutching his bag tightly. The silence stretched, painful and thick, until Clara's footsteps echoed from the living room. "Everything all right in here?" she asked softly, leaning against the doorway. Miles's eyes widened. He shoved the bag under his chair with his foot. "Yeah, Mom. Everything's fine." Adrian forced a smile, but his heart pounded. Clara's gaze lingered on them, suspicion flickering in her eyes. She didn't press further, but the doubt remained. Later that night, when the house was quiet, Adrian stood outside Miles's room, listening. Inside, he could hear faint sounds, the rustle of paper, the clink of coins being counted, and a soft whispering, as if his son were talking to someone who wasn't there. Adrian's fists clenched. The boy wasn't just hiding money. He was preparing for something. Something bigger. He backed away from the door, his heart heavy with dread. The image of Miles at the bus stop replayed in his mind, sharper now, more sinister. A child begging for warmth, hiding a truth too large for his age. Adrian knew one thing for certain. The next time he caught Miles sneaking out, he wouldn't just ask questions. He would demand answers. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. Adrian lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the hum of the heater doing little to ease the restless churn of his mind. Clara breathed softly beside him, her sleep fragile and deep. He envied her peace. Then he heard it, the faint creak of floorboards down the hall. Adrian's chest tightened. He slid carefully from the bed, his bare feet silent against the cold floor. Through the dim hallway, a sliver of light slipped beneath Miles's door, then vanished. A moment later, the door eased open, and Miles emerged, fully dressed, his backpack slung across his shoulder. Adrian's heart sank. Miles tiptoed toward the stairs, moving with the practiced quiet of someone who had done this before. But when his small hand touched the banister, Adrian's voice broke the silence. "Where are you going?" Miles froze. His shoulders stiffened, his breath caught. Slowly, he turned. His eyes widened in the half-darkness, caught between fear and guilt. Dad's voice cracked. "Please, don't wake Mom." Adrian stepped forward, his voice low but unyielding. "You're not leaving this house until you tell me the truth." Miles clutched his backpack tighter, panic flickering across his face. "I have to. They're waiting." He stopped himself, biting down on the words. Adrian's pulse thundered. "Who's waiting?" The boy's silence screamed louder than any confession. Adrian moved closer, his voice trembling now, anger threaded with desperation. "Miles, you're 12 years old. What could possibly be so important that you'd risk freezing, sneaking out in the middle of the night?" Tears welled in Miles's eyes. "You don't understand. Then make me understand." Adrian's voice rose despite himself. He immediately glanced toward the bedroom, terrified Clara would hear. He lowered his tone, sharp and urgent. "Tell me, Miles. Tell me now." The boy's small hand shook as he unzipped his backpack. He pulled out a ragged cloth, unfolding it on the stair. Inside lay a pitiful pile of coins, crumpled $1 bills, and a few stray quarters sticky with grime. Adrian stared, speechless. Miles's voice broke. "I earned it. Washing windshields. Carrying bags. Whatever people ask. I go every night. They give me money. Not much, but enough." Adrian's knees felt weak. His son, 12 years old, out in the freezing dark, begging strangers for coins like a street orphan. His throat tightened, rage and sorrow colliding in his chest. "Why, Miles?" Adrian whispered. "Why would you do this?" The boy's face twisted, his tears spilling freely now. "Because you're drowning, Dad. I hear you and Mom whispering about bills, about the hospital. You're always tired, always fighting. I thought if I helped, maybe things wouldn't be so bad." The truth hit Adrian like a blow. His son wasn't sneaking out for rebellion, for trouble, for mischief. He was sneaking out to save them. Adrian sank to his knees, gripping the edge of the banister as if to steady himself. His voice shook. "Miles, you could have been hurt. You could have been taken. Do you realize what could have happened to you out there?" Miles's sobs grew harsher. "But I can't stop. Not yet. I promised." Adrian's head jerked up. "Promise to?" Miles's lips clamped shut, his eyes wide with terror. I can't say. The silence after those words was crushing. Adrian's hands trembled. There was someone else involved. Someone his son was protecting. Behind them, a floorboard creaked. Adrian turned sharply. Clara stood at the top of the stairs, her hand clutching the railing, her face pale. Her voice trembled. Adrian, what's going on? Adrian froze. Miles's body stiffened, his face crumpling as he whispered the words that now cut deeper than ever. Please don't tell Mom. For a long, unbearable moment, the hallway was frozen in silence. Adrian knelt at the foot of the stairs, Miles clutching his ragged backpack like a shield, and Clara stood above them, pale as the moonlight spilling through the window. Her hand trembled against the banister, her eyes darting between her husband and her son. Adrian, she whispered again, her voice breaking. What's happening? Adrian rose slowly, torn between his son's desperate plea and his wife's fragile trust. He reached for Clara's hand, but she pulled back. Why is Miles dressed? Why does he have money in his bag? Her voice cracked. Adrian, please tell me I'm not seeing what I think I'm seeing. Miles's chest heaved. Mom, it's not what you think. Then what is it? Clara snapped, her fear sharp as glass. Why are you sneaking out in the middle of the night? Why are you crying? Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to steady her. Clara, please. Let me handle this. But Clara's eyes burned with hurt. Handle it? You've been hiding something from me. Both of you. Miles collapsed onto the stair, burying his face in his hands. His muffled voice broke through the quiet. I was just trying to help. Clara stepped closer, tears brimming. Help? How can freezing on the street help us? Adrian knelt beside Miles again, gripping his shoulders gently. Tell her the truth, son. She deserves to know. Miles lifted his head, his cheeks streaked with tears. His lips trembled, but when he looked at Clara, the words died in his throat. I can't, he whispered. If I tell her, it'll break her. Clara's sob escaped before she could stop it. She turned away, pressing her hand to her mouth. The tension thickened until Miles suddenly stood, clutching his backpack. I have to go, he blurted, pushing past Adrian toward the door. Miles, stop. Adrian's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. But Miles struggled, panic flooding his face. I promise someone. If I don't show up, they'll be angry. The words echoed like thunder in Adrian's chest. Someone. There was someone out there expecting his 12-year-old son in the dead of night. Who? Adrian demanded, his grip tightening. Who are you meeting? Miles shook his head violently, fear flashing in his eyes. I can't say. Clara gasped from behind them, her voice trembling. Adrian, someone's using him. Adrian's heart pounded, his mind spinning with images of predators, criminals, strangers luring his boy into danger. The thought made bile rise in his throat. You're not going anywhere, Adrian said firmly, pulling Miles into his chest despite the boy's resistance. Not tonight. Not ever again. Miles's small fists pounded weakly against him, but the fight drained quickly into sobs. You don't understand. If I don't go, they'll think I don't care. I have to keep my promise. Adrian's voice shook with fury and fear. No promise is worth your life. Clara stepped closer, wrapping her arms around both of them, her tears falling freely. Miles, please, whatever this is, you're not alone. You don't have to hide from us. But Miles only sobbed harder, repeating the same phrase through his tears. I can't stop. Not yet. I can't. Later that night, after Miles finally collapsed into exhausted sleep, Adrian sat at the kitchen table, his head buried in his hands. Clara sat across from him, silent, her eyes swollen from crying. Between them lay Miles's backpack, half-zipped, its contents spilling slightly. The coins, the crumpled bills, the ragged cloth. Evidence of a secret life their son was leading in the shadows. Clara's voice finally broke the silence. Adrian, we need to find out who's behind this. Whoever's waiting for him, it isn't safe. Adrian lifted his head slowly, his jaw clenched. I will. Tomorrow night, if he tries again, I'll follow him. The plan sat between them, heavy with dread. Because whatever truth waited in the darkness, Adrian knew it was closer than they feared, and far more dangerous than either of them imagined. The following night crawled by with unbearable slowness. Adrian sat in the darkened living room, the only light a dim lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Every creak of the house set his nerves on edge. Upstairs, Clara pretended to sleep, though Adrian knew her eyes were just as restless as his. When the clock struck midnight, the sound Adrian dreaded finally came. The faint squeak of a door hinge, the careful press of footsteps on the stairs. His chest tightened. Miles appeared in the hallway, backpack slung over his shoulder, his small frame outlined against the faint glow from the kitchen. He moved like a shadow, unaware of the eyes tracking his every step. Adrian waited until his son slipped out the front door before grabbing his coat and following silently, his own heartbeat thudding like a drum. The night air was bitter, biting through fabric and flesh. Adrian kept his distance, careful not to let his footsteps echo too close. Miles's figure moved ahead steadily, shoulders hunched, head down. The boy walked with purpose, like someone retracing a path already memorized. They cut across empty streets, past shuttered shops and dim alleys, until they reached the gas station on Pine Street. Its neon sign buzzed faintly, throwing a sickly red glow over the cracked pavement. Adrian ducked behind a parked car, his breath fogging in the cold. He watched as Miles approached the station, pulling a ragged cloth from his bag. He laid it across the ground near the pump island, carefully arranging coins and small bills on top. Adrian's brow furrowed. What was he doing? Then, out of the shadows, two older boys emerged. Teenagers, maybe 16, maybe 17. They wore hoodies pulled low, hands shoved deep in their pockets. One of them smirked as he crouched in front of Miles. Adrian's stomach turned. The boy snatched up the coins, tossing a few back into Miles's lap. Not enough, he said coldly. Miles's voice trembled. I'll get more tomorrow. I promise. The second teen stepped forward, towering over him. You better. We don't wait forever. Adrian's hands curled into fists, fury pounding in his veins. His son, his 12-year-old son, was being shaken down like prey. Miles nodded quickly, scrambling to gather the rejected coins. I will. Just don't tell anyone. Please. The teens exchanged a glance, then melted back into the darkness, leaving Miles alone on the cold pavement. Adrian nearly surged forward right then, but forced himself to wait until they were gone. Only then did he step out from behind the car, his voice cutting through the night like steel. Miles! The boy jumped, spinning around. His eyes went wide with terror when he saw his father. Dad! Adrian's chest heaved with rage and heartbreak. You're giving money to them? Those boys. Is that who you've been sneaking out for? Miles's lips trembled, his body shaking. I had to. They said if I didn't, they'd come to the house. They know about Mom. They know about you. The words sliced through Adrian like knives. The threat was real. Whoever those boys were, they weren't just bullies. They had leverage, and they'd used Miles's fear to control him. Adrian grabbed his son's shoulders, his voice raw. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come to me? Tears spilled down Miles's cheeks. Because you're already tired, Dad. You're already fighting with the bills. I thought if I did this, they'd leave us alone. Adrian pulled him close, his fury turning to despair. He wanted to storm into the shadows and drag those boys out by their collars. But the fear in his son's eyes stopped him. The situation was bigger, uglier. And if they truly knew about Clara, the danger wasn't just for Miles anymore. It was for the whole family. Listen to me, Adrian whispered fiercely. This ends tonight. You're not alone in this. I won't let them touch you again. Miles clung to him, sobbing into his coat. As Adrian held his son in the freezing dark, he realized the truth he'd uncovered was only the surface. Two nameless teens lurking in shadows were dangerous enough, but their threat carried the stench of something larger, something far more menacing. And Adrian knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Holtz family secret had just turned into a family war. The house was quieter than usual the next evening, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that carried too much weight, thick enough to smother every word left unsaid. Clara moved slowly through the kitchen, her hands busy with dishes, but her eyes kept straying toward the window, toward the darkness outside. Adrian sat at the table, his jaw tight, staring at his phone, but not reading anything on it. The memory of the gas station burned behind his eyes. Miles hunched on the pavement, begging two strangers for mercy. Rage had boiled his chest all day, but fear kept it locked there. If those boys knew where they lived, what else were they capable of? Miles sat nearby, unusually still, his backpack resting against his chair. He wasn't eating, just picking at his food. His shoulders curled inward, as though he wanted to disappear into the shadows. Finally, Clara set the dish towel down. Her voice was soft, but firm. "Adrian, I know you've been keeping something from me. Last night, I saw enough. And today, Miles won't even look at me. I can't pretend anymore. Tell me the truth." Adrian's chest tightened. He looked at his wife's pale, searching face and then at his son, who sat frozen with wide, pleading eyes. "Don't tell, Mom." The words echoed in his mind like a curse. Clara's voice shook. "Adrian, what's happening to our boy?" Adrian opened his mouth, but before he could answer, a sound from outside cut him short. A dull thud against the front porch. Then another. Adrian rose instantly, his body tense. Clara frowned, moving toward the door, but Adrian stopped her with a sharp gesture. He opened it carefully. On the porch lay a soda can, dented, rolling slowly against the wood. Another followed, thrown from the darkness, clattering against the steps. And then came the voices, low, mocking, carried by the night air. "Where's our little helper?" one sneered. Adrian's blood turned cold. Miles gasped, shrinking in his seat. No, they came." Clara's eyes widened. "Who's out there?" Adrian slammed the door shut, his chest heaving. "Get upstairs. Both of you. Now." But Miles didn't move. His hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles went white. "If I don't go, they'll hurt us." Clara looked at Adrian, horrified. "Adrian, what is he talking about?" Adrian crouched in front of his son, gripping his trembling shoulders. "Listen to me, Miles. You don't owe them anything. Do you hear me? They don't control you. They don't control us." But the boy's eyes filled with tears. I promised them." Adrian's chest ached. The same word again. Promise. But promise what? To whom? And why would teenagers threaten a child over coins? It didn't make sense unless someone bigger was behind it. Outside, another can clattered against the house, this time harder. Clara jumped, clutching her chest. Her voice broke. "Adrian, we need to call the police." Adrian's mind raced. If the police came, the boys might vanish and the trail would go cold. Worse, what if reporting it only escalated their threats? He felt trapped between protecting his family now and uncovering the truth later. Miles shook his head furiously. "No cops. They said if I told, they'd..." He trailed off, trembling violently. Clara pulled him into her arms, tears streaking her face. "My baby, why didn't you tell us sooner?" Adrian's fists clenched. He had never felt so powerless. Every instinct screamed to storm outside and confront whoever was lurking in the dark. But logic warned him. Charging blind into the unknown could put them all in greater danger. The can stopped. Silence pressed in again, heavier than before. Whoever had been outside was gone, at least for now. But the message was clear. They weren't afraid to come closer, to taunt the Holts at their very doorstep. Adrian turned to Clara, his voice low but determined. "Tomorrow night, I'm following them. I need to know who's behind this. And once I do, I'll end it." Clara's eyes shimmered with both fear and trust. "Just promise me you won't put yourself in danger." Adrian looked at Miles, still trembling in his mother's arms, and felt the weight of his vow. "I can't promise that, but I can promise this. They'll never take our son from us again." The following night, Adrian left nothing to chance. He waited in the dark living room, jacket already on, shoes by the door. Clara had begged him not to go, her voice trembling with fear, but Adrian's answer had been simple. "If we don't end this now, they'll keep coming." Upstairs, Miles lay awake, his small body curled in bed, clutching the blanket. He hadn't fought his father this time, hadn't whispered, "Don't tell Mom." Instead, he turned his face to the wall, silent tears glistening in the shadows. When the clock struck midnight, Adrian slipped out of the house. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that sharpened every sound. The crunch of his boots on frost, the low buzz of a distant street lamp. He kept his distance, scanning the darkness until two figures emerged at the corner. The teens. Same hoodies, same swagger, moving with the lazy confidence of predators who believed no one would stop them. Adrian followed. They led him across blocks he knew well, though at night they felt foreign and hostile. The boys didn't notice the shadow behind them. They were too busy laughing under their breath, tossing a bottle between them. Their path curved back toward Pine Street, then deeper, past the gas station, toward an abandoned warehouse that hunched like a carcass at the edge of town. Adrian's pulse quickened. The teen stopped outside, glancing around before slipping inside through a broken door. Adrian waited, heart hammering, then crept after them. The warehouse air was thick with dampness and dust. Faint light seeped through cracked windows, illuminating graffiti-stained walls. Voices echoed. Not just the two boys, others. Older, rougher. Adrian edged closer, hiding behind a rusted support beam. In the center of the warehouse, a group of young men huddled, maybe 5 or 6 in total. The two teens dropped coins and small bills onto a crate, laughing as they exaggerated their night's haul. A tall figure stepped forward from the shadows. Not a teenager. A man, maybe mid-20s, broad-shouldered, his face half lit by the glow of a cigarette. His voice cut through the warehouse, low and commanding. "This is it. You call this money?" He kicked the crate, scattering coins across the floor. The smaller boys flinched. "We'll get more tomorrow," one stammered. The man exhaled smoke slowly, his eyes hard. "You better. And don't forget the kid. He's eager. Desperate. That's what makes him useful." Adrian's fists clenched. His son. They were using Miles like bait, like a tool, to fetch scraps, knowing he was too scared to resist. One of the teens chuckled nervously. "He really thinks he's helping his family. Poor kid." The group laughed. Adrian's stomach twisted. His son's pain, his late-night tears, the cold bus stops, all entertainment to them. The leader ground his cigarette under his boot. "Tomorrow night, you tell him it's not enough. If he wants to keep his mommy safe, he'll bring something bigger." He leaned forward, his grin sharp. "Phones, wallets, whatever he can get his hands on." Adrian's blood ran cold. This wasn't about spare change anymore. They wanted to push Miles further, to break him, to turn him into their thief. Rage surged in Adrian's chest, hot and uncontrollable. He nearly stepped out right then, ready to tear the man apart with his bare hands. But instinct held him back. If he charged now, he'd be outnumbered, cornered, powerless. He needed to be smart. He backed away, quietly, the voices fading as he slipped out into the night. The cold air hit him like a slap, grounding him. For the first time in weeks, the pieces began to fit together. Miles wasn't just being bullied or coerced by a couple of teenagers. He was being manipulated by something larger, a small ring of predators feeding on vulnerable kids, turning their fear into currency. Adrian's chest heaved as he walked back toward home. His son was in deeper danger than he'd realized. And tomorrow, when they demanded more, Miles would face an impossible choice. Adrian knew then. The confrontation was no longer about keeping secrets from Clara or shielding Miles from shame. It was about survival, and the next move he made would decide whether his family broke apart or fought back together. The night air was sharp, colder than the nights before, but Adrian hardly felt it. His mind replayed the warehouse scene in brutal detail. The sneers, the laughter, the leader's command that Miles start stealing. His son's innocence was being twisted into chains. Back home, he paced the living room, fists clenched, waiting. Clara sat on the couch, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Miles lingered at the foot of the stairs, clutching his backpack, restless and fearful. "Adrian," Clara whispered, "please, you have to tell me what you saw." Adrian's jaw tightened. He looked at Miles, who shook his head desperately, whispering, "Don't tell, Mom." But Adrian's patience had shattered. "They're using him, Clara," Adrian said, his voice raw. "Older boys. A man leading them. They take his money, humiliate him, and now they want him to steal. They said if he doesn't, they'll come after us." Clara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears spilled instantly. No, not our boy. Not Miles. Miles's shoulders shook. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to help. Adrian's fury broke through his restraint. He slammed his fist against the wall, making both Clara and Miles flinch. Help? You're 12 years old. You don't belong in the cold, begging strangers for coins, being their puppet. Miles's face crumpled. I thought if I brought them money, they'd leave us alone. I thought if I kept it from Mom, she wouldn't get sicker from worrying. Clara crossed the room and dropped to her knees, clutching her son's trembling hands. Oh, baby, you don't protect us. We protect you. Her sobs racked her fragile frame, but her voice remained steady. No more secrets. No more sneaking out. This ends tonight. Before Adrian could speak, a loud bang rattled the front door. All three of them froze. Another bang followed, harder this time, shaking the frame. A voice shouted from outside. Where's the kid? Miles whimpered, shrinking into his mother's arms. Adrian surged forward, his blood boiling. He yanked the door open, stepping onto the porch. Three figures stood in the yard, the two teens from before and the older man, cigarette glowing in his hand. His smirk widened at the sight of Adrian. Well, the man drawled. The hero dad. Thought you'd stay asleep while your boy paid his debts. Adrian's fists clenched. You stay away from my son. The man stepped closer, his presence radiating menace. Your son owes us. He promised. And when someone promises me, they deliver. If he doesn't, maybe I come inside and take something else instead. Adrian's rage erupted. He lunged, grabbing the man by the collar, slamming him against the porch post. The teens jumped back, startled. Clara cried out from behind the door, clutching Miles to her chest. You listen to me, Adrian growled, his voice trembling with fury. You ever come near my family again, I'll bury you where no one finds you. The man smirked through gritted teeth. Big words, old man. But you can't fight all of us. And you can't watch him every second of every day. He jerked his chin toward Miles. We'll always be waiting. Adrian's fist hovered in the air, his entire body quaking with the urge to strike. But then Clara's voice pierced the night. Adrian, don't. He wants you to lose control. Her words cut through the haze. Adrian shoved the man back, releasing him, but his eyes burned with fire. If you ever come back, I swear I'll drag you to the police myself. The man straightened his jacket, his smirk returning. We'll see. He motioned to the teens, and they slunk back into the shadows. Within moments, the street was empty again, leaving only the echo of their laughter. Adrian turned, breathing hard, and saw Clara still clutching Miles in the doorway. The boy's eyes were wide with terror, his face pale, but something else shone there too, relief. The secret was no longer his alone. Adrian pulled them both close, his voice hoarse. It's over. They won't touch us again. I'll make sure of it. But deep inside, he knew the man's words were true. This wasn't over. Not yet. And the final choice, to fight back or to surrender, still loomed ahead. The Holts didn't sleep that night. Adrian sat in the armchair, a baseball bat across his lap, eyes fixed on the window. Clara stayed curled on the couch with Miles, her arms wrapped tightly around him as though letting go would invite the darkness back in. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind outside, made them all flinch. By morning, the world looked almost normal again. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, too bright, too calm. But the silence inside the house felt heavier than ever. Clara brewed coffee with shaky hands, her gaze flicking constantly toward the door. Miles sat at the table, head down, the weight of shame pressing his small shoulders down like stones. Adrian finally set the bat aside, rubbing his tired eyes. We have to go to the police, Clara said firmly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. We can't protect him from this alone. Adrian nodded slowly. You're right. But before we go, I need the full truth. He turned to Miles, his eyes soft but unyielding. Son, no more hiding. Last night proved it. We can't keep secrets. You have to tell us everything. Miles's lips quivered. His eyes darted between them, panic rising again. If I tell you, you'll hate me. Clara dropped to her knees beside him, cupping his face. Never. You are our son. Nothing changes that. Tears spilled down Miles's cheeks. His voice cracked. I wasn't just giving them money. I was giving them yours. Adrian's chest tightened. What do you mean? Miles's sobs came hard now, words tumbling out in a rush. I took it from you. From your wallet. From the drawer in your room. They told me if I didn't bring enough, they'd hurt Mom. They knew she'd been sick. I was so scared. I thought if I gave them what we had, they'd leave us alone. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Adrian felt the room tilt. His son, his sweet, frightened boy, had been stealing from him, not out of greed, but out of terror. Every missing dollar, every inexplicable shortage suddenly made sense. That's why you didn't want us to know, Adrian whispered, the truth landing like a punch. Not just because you were scared of them, but because you thought you'd betrayed us. Miles nodded, sobbing. I didn't want Mom to think I was bad. I didn't want you to hate me. So I froze outside instead of telling you. Adrian pulled him into his arms, crushing him against his chest. His own tears burned hot. Oh, son, you're not bad. You were protecting us in the only way you knew how. But you should never have carried that alone. Clara joined them, wrapping her arms around them both, her tears wetting Miles's hair. We should have seen how much you were hurting. We should have protected you better. For a long moment, they clung together, their family bound not by secrets anymore, but by shared pain and unspoken forgiveness. Later that afternoon, Adrian drove them to the police station. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, but his heart felt lighter. No more hiding. No more pretending. Miles sat in the back seat, pale but calmer, knowing his parents stood beside him now. The officers listened carefully as Adrian explained everything. The bus stop, the teens, the warehouse, the leader who demanded more. Miles sat quietly, nodding when asked, his voice small but steady. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't alone in telling the story. When they left, Clara squeezed Adrian's hand, her voice soft. It's over now. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Adrian glanced in the mirror at his son, who leaned against the window, eyes closed, the sunlight warming his tired face. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be questions, investigations, maybe even more threats. But the secret that nearly destroyed them had finally been dragged into the light. And as the car rolled forward, Adrian vowed silently that he would never again let silence freeze his family the way it had frozen his son on that bus stop bench.